So Google has been making smartphones for over a decade, starting with the Nexus series and evolving into the Pixel lineup. But before that, they were laying the foundation for Android with early experimental devices like the HTC Dream and the HTC Magic. Some of these phones were legendary, setting new industry standards, while others were complete failures. So today I'm going to go through every major Google flagship, yes, not the A series or anything like that, just the flagship ones, and we'll be ranking them based on their impact and how good they were at launch, and whether they were worth buying. So as usual, the S tier will be for the best of the best, the A tier for almost the best, B for the good ones, C for those who were neither good or bad, and D for the worst ones. Before the Nexus series, Google's first ever Android phone was the HTC Dream, also known as the T-Mobile G1 in some regions. This phone introduced Android to the world, bringing a completely different approach from the iPhone. It had a slide-out keyboard, yes, a trackball for navigation and expandable storage, things Apple wasn't offering. However, the phone was bulky, the touchscreen wasn't as smooth as the iPhone, and the Android market, which is now the Play Store, had very few apps in the catalog. While it wasn't perfect, it played a crucial role in shaping Android's future, so I'm gonna give this a B tier. The HTC Magic, also known as the T-Mobile MyTouch 3G, very sweet name, was Google's second attempt at an Android phone, and this time they ditched the physical keyboard, for good reasons obviously, for an all-touchscreen design. It looked more modern and introduced Android 1.5 Cupcake, which brought on an on-screen keyboard. Yes, finally, something that the HTC Dream lacked. However, performance was still sluggish, app support was limited, and overall experience still felt rough compared to what was coming next. The Nexus One was Google's first official Nexus phone built by HTC. It had a clean stock Android experience with no bloatware, making it a dream phone for us, the tech enthusiasts. It also introduced an AMOLED display which looked fantastic for its time. However, it lacked multitouch support at launch, which was a big drawback as competitors were already implementing it. It was a step in the right direction but didn't feel groundbreaking enough to be a must-buy even at that time. So I think I will give this a C tier also. The Nexus S, built by Samsung, improved on the Nexus One by adding NFC and a curved display, which made it more comfortable to hold. It was also one of the first phones to introduce contactless payments, though it wasn't widely usable yet. The biggest downside was the cheap plastic build, which didn't feel premium, and also the hardware was only a minor upgrade over the previous model. So again a C tier. The Galaxy Nexus introduced Android 4.0 Ice Cream Sandwich, which brought a major UI redesign. It also had an AMOLED display and a sleek curved design. However, performance was still inconsistent, the camera was weak, and the battery life wasn't that great. It looked futuristic, but the experience was just average. So I think I'm gonna put this in the C tier also. The Nexus 4, made by LG, was a game changer. It had a premium glass back, a powerful Snapdragon S4 Pro chipset, and an unbeatable price of just $299 or $300 or around 29,000 rupees in India. However, the lack of LTE was a major drawback, making it feel outdated quickly. The glass back also made it fragile, and overheating was an issue. Still, for the price, it was one of the best Google phones ever made. So I think I'm gonna put this in the B. Okay, let's put this in the A tier. The Nexus 5 was the best Nexus phones ever made as per me. It had a 1080p display, a Snapdragon 800 processor, and still it was affordable. The biggest issue, however, was the cameras, and it wasn't as good as the competitors. But overall it was fast, smooth, and remains a fan favorite to this day. Even I very much like this device, so I'm gonna put this in the S tier. The Nexus 6 was Google's first attempt at a big screen phone. It had great stereo speakers, a solid display, and a decent performance. But at $649 or around 44,000 rupees, it was far more expensive than previous Nexus phones, and the huge size made it also difficult to use for some users. But also the phone wasn't that bad, so I think it deserves a B tier. The Nexus 5X was meant to be a budget-friendly Nexus device, but ended up being one of the Google's worst devices. The plastic build felt cheap, performance was mediocre with just 2 GB of RAM, and worst of all, it suffered from boot loop failures, rendering many devices useless. So yeah, that was pretty bad, and I think I will put this in the D tier. At launch, the Nexus 6P, built by Huawei, seemed like a dream phone. It had premium metal build, an excellent camera, and a beautiful OLED display. But just like the Nexus 5X, it suffered from boot loops and battery failures, even leading to class action lawsuits. It looked great on paper but was ultimately unreliable. Google ditched the Nexus branding and introduced the Pixel, marking its first real attempt at a premium smartphone. The Pixel had one of the best smartphone cameras of that time thanks to Google's advanced image processing, and it delivered a clean and smooth Android experience with guaranteed updates. However, its design was pretty uninspired with a large top and a bottom bezel, and it lacked wireless charging. But I still like this design though. The biggest issue, however, was the price at nearly $650 or about 57,000 rupees in India. It was a massive jump from the Nexus lineup, leaving many long-time fans disappointed. Still, it was a great phone that set the stage for the future of Pixel devices. So I think I'm gonna put this in the A tier. The Pixel 2 refined everything that made the first Pixel great. The camera was even better, the software experience was more polished. It also introduced features like the Active Edge, allowing users to squeeze the phone to activate Google Assistant. But the removal of the headphone jack was controversial, and the Pixel 2 XL suffered from display issues, with users complaining about a blue tint near the edge of the displays and a screen burning. Despite these drawbacks, its cameras and fluid performance made it one of the best Android phones of that particular year. So an easy S tier for this one. The Pixel 3 improved Google's computational photography with features like the night sight, making low-light photography significantly better than most of its competitors. However, the design remained outdated with thick bezels, and the Pixel 3 XL for some reason had an unusually deep, ugly notch that turned many users away. Like, who the hell thought about this design, man? Battery life was also mediocre, and hardware issues such as memory management problems sort of ruined this phone's image. While it had one of the best cameras in the Pixel lineup, the overall experience felt a bit lacking compared to the rivals. So I think I'm gonna put this in the B tier. The Pixel 4 was a strange experiment as per my opinion. It introduced the motion sense which allowed users to control the phone using gestures. But obviously the feature was gimmicky and barely worked well. It also had a 90Hz refresh rate display, but Google made a huge mistake by giving the Pixel 4 a tiny battery, leading to a terrible battery life. Another major disappointment was the lack of an ultra-wide angle camera, which was becoming a standard feature on flagship phones back then also. While its face unlock system was extremely fast, Google ditched fingerprint sensors entirely, which was another controversial decision. Seems like Google really loved Apple's. It had great software and solid cameras, but poor hardware choices held it back. So I think I'm gonna put this in the B tier. So after the Pixel 4's failure, Google completely changed its approach. The Pixel 5 wasn't really a flagship, rather a mid-range phone. It used a mid-range Snapdragon 765G chipset instead of a top-tier processor, focusing instead on battery life, a smoother display, and clean design. This meant performance wasn't on par with their competitors, but it had excellent battery life and an overall balanced experience. It wasn't exciting, but it was also reliable, making a shift in Google's smartphone strategy. So I'm gonna put this in the A tier. The Pixel 6 was Google's big comeback. It introduced a bold new design with a unique camera bar, or basically the visor, a higher refresh rate display, and most importantly, Google's first in-house processor, the Tensor chipset, or basically Samsung's Exynos but rebranded. This allowed for improved AI features and camera capabilities. The main camera was a massive upgrade over the previous Pixels, offering excellent dynamic range and low light performance. However, it wasn't the perfect phone. It had overheating issues, slow fingerprint unlocking, and software bugs at launch. But at its price, it offered flagship tier features at a much lower cost, making it one of Google's best Pixels of that time. So I'm gonna put this in the S tier. The Pixel 7 was more of a refinement rather than a revolution. It had a slightly better Tensor G2 chipset, improved cameras, and more polished design. The software experience was smooth, and the phone introduced features like photo unblur and improved speech recognition. However, battery life was still not the best, and charging speeds remained slow compared to its competitors, which I think it is still today. While it didn't bring anything groundbreaking, it was a solid, well-balanced phone that improved upon the Pixel 6 foundation. So I think I'm gonna put this in the A tier. The Pixel 8 focused on AI-powered features, with tools like the best tech for editing facial expressions in group photos and even more advanced speech-to-text capabilities. It also introduced a brighter display, longer software support, promising 7 years worth of updates, so that was also a big upgrade. But the biggest problem was the Tensor G3 chipset. It still lagged behind Qualcomm and Apple's processors in efficiency, leading to heating and battery drain issues, even though later on it was quickly resolved. The phone also was overpriced compared to its competition, making it good but not exceptional. So I think I'm gonna put this in the B tier because it was still a good phone, especially when you could get this at the half price during the BBT sales. So now the Pixel 9. The Pixel 9 continues Google's AI-driven approach, refining the software experience and bringing better battery life, improved performance, and enhanced camera processing. The processor still lags behind, obviously, in terms of raw performance, but this time Google seems to have finally found the right balance between hardware and software, making it one of the most well-rounded Pixels yet. While it still faces tough competition and better phones can be found for around the same price, and we all know the pricing strategy of Pixel is so stupid in India, but still the Pixel line stands as one of the best smartphones of 2025 in terms of overall improvements, proving that Google has finally mastered the Pixel's formula. So next year we might also get to see a better chipset, so yeah, the Pixel 10 might be a better value, but I'm gonna put this in the B tier. No, let's put this in the A tier. And that was every Nexus and Pixel flagships ranked. Some were legendary and some were complete disasters. The Nexus series gave us affordable stock Android phones, while the Pixel lineup has been pushing smartphones photography and AI to new levels. But still they need to fix the pricing here in India. Which Pixel and Nexus phone was your favorite? Let me know in the comments, and as always watch these videos too. Till the next one, this was Rideep. See you guys.